Good evening, everyone. Okay. Good evening. My name is Elena Vidal, and I'm here to welcome you to Museo del Barrio, and thank you so much for being here today. It's truly a pleasure to have you join us for this important conversation around flow states, La Trienal 2024. We are thrilled to see so many familiar faces, as well as new ones, as well as artists in the show, engaging with this remarkable exhibition that reflects the dynamism and diversity of Latinx and Latin American art. Flow States marks a significant expansion of our previous efforts. The exhibition includes 33 incredible artists from the United States, Puerto Rico, and for the first time extends across Europe, Asia, the Caribbean, and the Americas. Yes, thank you. At its heart, Flow States explores the idea of flow in all of its complexity, whether it be the movement of people, energy, or matter. As an institution committed to advancing conversations around Latinx artistic production, the concept of flow resonates deeply with us. It presents opportunities to rethink structural diversity. First, I would like to take a moment to congratulate our curatorial team, Rodrigo Maura, Susana Temkin, and Maria Elena Ortiz. Thank you. For their vision and dedication in bringing this powerful exhibition to life. Their expertise and passion are evident in the work on display. This exhibition not only showcases incredible artistic talent, but also invites us to explore the complex cultural, social, and political conversations that shape the Latinx experience today. The curators have done an outstanding job at navigating these narratives with sensitivity and insight, creating an engaging and thought-provoking experience for all of us. Today, we are fortunate to have an esteemed moderator to lead this discussion, Marina Reyes Franco, curator at the Museo del Contemporáneo de Puerto Rico. We are excited to have her guide us through today's conversation, shedding light on the curatorial process and the exhibition's themes. None of this would have been possible without the generous support of the Board of Trustees of El Museo del Barrio, Lori Cumbo of the Department of Cultural Affairs, and foundations, corporations, and patrons such as the Jacques and Natasha Gelman Foundation, with leadership support from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, major support from the National Endowment for the Arts and Tony Bechara, and funding provided by the Mex-Am Cultural Foundation, the Trienal Council, which includes Patrick Collins, Virginia Cowles Schroth, Agnes Gund, Maria Eugenia Maury, Ramiro Ortiz Mayorga, Kunal and Kishore Shah, Monica Vidal, and Joseph Sherman. Additional support has been provided by Marilyn Pearl Losberg, Javier Lumbreras, Isabel and Julio Nazario, Robert and Encarnita Quinlan, Tracy and Philip Reese, and public support from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. Thank you. That was a very long list.
Thank God.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Once again, thank you for being here with us tonight to celebrate Flow States. I hope all of you got an opportunity to see the exhibition today. If not, please come back this weekend or through the run of the show many times. There's such incredible work to see here. I hope you find today's discussion inspiring and it deepens your appreciation for the creative and intellectual labor behind this groundbreaking show. Please join me once again in welcoming Marina Reyes Franco, as well as Rodrigo, Susana, and Maria Elena. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming here. Thank you for the invitation to be in conversation about this fabulous show. And, you know, I just wanted to start off with kind of going back to our first Trienal and where that one went and like how it made the leap to our current exhibition. So like, how does this exhibition that revolves around the concept of diaspora build on that previous work?
Great question. Well, I think maybe Rodrigo and I will start with that since we have had the good fortune of being involved in both of the two triennales so far, held at El Museo del Barrio, and want to acknowledge Elia Alba, our co-curator from Estamos Bien. And you know, I think this is a periodic show, so every Trienal is going to have its own flavor and also its own reflections of the contemporary moment. I think, you know, that's built into the nature of a Trienal, a Bienal, and what have you. I think with Estamos Bien, also at that particular moment, we were really, I feel like Latinx, that term, it wasn't new, but it was still something that really hadn't been fully spoken about even here at El Museo del Barrio. So we really, I think, had a very intersectional focus with that exhibition that I think has brought us here today and thinking about diasporas. And one thing that we also noticed, you know, we've been doing studio visits over the years, and this is kind of a funny entry point, but we started thinking about the concept of names, you know, how we would find an artist who we thought might be Latinx, who maybe or maybe wasn't Latinx, you know, family histories, step families. Or, you know, they come from other backgrounds that have shared these different imperial histories that have left a mark on their names. So, you know, that is reflected in today in flow states by the inclusion of some of our Filipino artists. And then we also talk about what's not in a name. Like, I'm Susana Temkin, like nobody knows who I am, you know? Or, you know, Liz, I'm calling you out. I see you in the audience. We have artists here, and Liz Cohen, you know, another artist, Carolyn Kent, who's these names that can elide sometimes who we are. So I think that was also an entry point to thinking about how can we make these conversations more generative instead of closing each other off in ways that are actually, they're unnatural. You know, we don't go about the world like that. So I'll let Regina.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to start because, I mean, obviously there would be no flow states without Estamos Bien. But also to backtrack a little bit, the S files, right? So those were like really the seed, no? And those shows, I think there were, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think there were at least 7 of them, but maybe more.
I believe it was from 1999 to like 2012.
2012, so I think that, but they were on and off, so they were annual initially, then they became biennial. Yeah, but that's right, that as far as the time span, but what I wanted to say is that that show had a New York focus, right? So that show was really like an exhibition about Latino artists based in New York, and, you know, could be, you know, short living, you know, like people who were here for, you know, their artistic training, you know, in the masters or whatever. And people would lie that they lived here. We know that. We realized that, you know, just anecdotally. And with Estamos Bien, you know, this is when I, you know, first joined El Museo back in 2019. I met Elia, Susana, of course, and we started to talk about this. You know, Elia was already contacted, so we said like, oh, but this is, you know, the big leap here is, you know, to really think of how we're gonna, you know, broaden this conversation and make it more inclusive and make it more complicated and make it more more of the moment, right? So one big thing that for us was definitely look at, you know, conversations around identity at a more expanded way, right? To look at this like really, you know, yeah, so Susanna tackled it. She really covered a lot on that, but just wanted to say like that. And then, you know, obviously the scope became nationwide, and the pandemic hit, and, you know, caught us midway, which was, you know, a disaster of sorts because, you know, we couldn't finish our travels, we couldn't have performance. I remember we wanted to do a show about performance, and then there was like, oh, there's no way we're gonna do this now. So there's all that. But this is, you know, just to, you know, put us to speed on how did we get here, do we, you know, with flow state. So I think they're very different shows, but also there's 2 curators in common, so that's a big thing. You know, I grew up on the São Paulo Bienal system, and there was a tradition of the São Paulo Bienal that, you know, all curators should do 2 shows. That was a big thing, right? So it's like the Walter Zanini, you know, back in the day, they used to say like, the first one you learn how to do it, and then the second one you really, you know, do a show again, having learned from the first one. So I thought this was also an interesting aspect that we changed the curatorial team, but not entirely, and that's, you know, a common perspective about the 2 shows as well.
And Maria Elena, what interested you about this invitation? Like, what did you want to bring to the table from your own experience?
Well, you know, first of all, like I said yesterday, I love El Museo. Like, I think El Museo, we all have a very personal connection to this institution, no matter where you're standing from. So I will always respond the call of El Museo, if I can. Let me rephrase that.
Be careful.
Yeah, let me just. Yeah, I can. I'll take the call. Thank you. Thank you. Um, uh, but you know, I think that this museum was formed by a diasporic community of Puerto Ricans that moved here seeking a better situation, that then had their families here. So for me, the diaspora conversation is very natural. It's a part of the history of the institution, and of course, I've been working a lot with ideas of Blackness within Latinx, Latin American, and Caribbean culture. So if we were going to take on those themes, then for me was also an interesting aspect of the show. And as we also know now, there's been a lot of questions on indigeneity. So I think there's a lot of contemporary conversations that are pushing, or that are at least allowing us to think about other aspects of what Latinx, Latinidad, and all these different terminologies really represent to different people, and how we, have relationships that sometimes go beyond a definition of nation, like with the Philippine case and so on. So I think it was a good opportunity to speak about a specific aspect about the Latinx story.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no other place that has that institutional history that can put on a show like this. It's like it doesn't exist. So I read that you visited 80 studios. So first of all, like, wow, impressive. Over what period? Like of time?
I want to say it was probably over 14 months. Does that sound right to you guys? I mean,
Yeah.
I think we started with before you, Maria Elena. Sorry, yeah. So,
Okay, there's always.
but you caught up.
No, but also we
Real
all.
quick.
I feel like that's also something that we all bring as curators. Like we're in conversation with some
Yeah,
artists. And
yeah, yeah. There was definitely like curatorial collective moment in last summer when we presented prospective lists collectively, internally for everybody's review, and that put us on a more systematic pace of studio visits.
And where?
Thanks to Susanna, very
Where
much.
did you go, and how did you decide to make those trips like collectively?
Well, I mean, I'll say too, the beauty of having a 3-person team is that, we can tackle things individually, but at least I think we would try usually to at least 2 of us, had to
Yeah.
be present
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
put our eyes on the work in
and,
person.
Yeah, and we would follow up with a Zoom call
Yes.
individually.
And sometimes if the 3 of us were not there, one would do the studio visit later, to kind of also get a sense of what was, of the experience. Of course, I'm based in Fort Worth, so going to Texas was important. Going to Puerto Rico was important. Going everywhere actually was important.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I was thinking a lot about this today, right? That this is, we can continue to compare with Estamos Bien a little bit on how, one show look at identity like more like at a Latinx, as we phrase that, identity. But I think this show had this new show, Flow States, has an interest in geographies and this kind of multi-regionalism, if that's a notion. So, in Texas, I think it's a brilliant example. I couldn't make it in person this time because of my own, travel schedule. But Texas it's almost like a counter in the show, I feel. We have 4 artists, and they're, so amazing and unique, and they speak of a reality where identity and, the idea of displacement is spoken of so in such a unique way, and and so is the same case with another several of the regions or geographies that we decided to look at for the show.
And I'll just add one more thing because, for me, one of the most exciting parts of La Trienal is like the network that gets created between the cohort of artists and, I hope between one Trienal and the next. In the last Trienal, one thing that we all noted was just how generous the artists that we were visiting were. We'd go and have a studio visit, and they'd be like, hey, make sure, like, while you're here, like, you go 2 doors down, or, like, you go see my friend. So, that, of course, continued, but we also wanted to carry that spirit from Estamos Bien into flow states. So we asked all of, the alumni, like, give us a name. Like, who do you think, now you've gone through this experience, who do you think we should be looking at too? So, it all kind of enmeshes on one another, and, calling our friends and our contacts across cities, we came to see you. So, yeah.
So it was like just geographically, Texas, Puerto Rico, where else?
Yeah, and but I think there's also the fact that we were looking at regions. There's like different approaches to understand this geographic framework. So like indigeneity, it's a perfect example because it's not necessarily one region, but it's something that appears in the work of Mario Martinez, of Sara Rosalena, and of Coyo Zintli. At least I would name these 3 here. And they are not necessarily based on a place, but they speak of exactly. And in the case of Mario, there's the anecdote we've been telling people that when Susanna was the one who brought Mario into the conversation, when she first approached him, she asked him told him about the show, about the museum, say, hey, I'm not Latinx, I'm not in the show.
That was gonna be one of
yeah,
my
and and the name, Susanna already mentioned this as well, but the name is, Maria Elena said, for all I care, he could be my tío, no? He could be my uncle. And but actually he's an enrolled Yaqui tribe member in Arizona, where he was born. But then he came around and said, no, this is so interesting. And, he started to talk about all these networks of artists of color historically when he was, based at in the Bay Area in the 80s, how close he was to the Chicanx movement there then and all that. So that's, there's like all different approaches to regionalities. And also, I think the greater Caribbean was also, and maybe Maria Elena could talk about this because we wanted also to make sure the African diaspora was really considered and represented strongly in the show. And that's another completely different geographic perspective. So I was just, using Texas as an example, but diasporic flows is really the theme of the show or the framework we wanted to construct.
Were you gonna ask a specific question?
No. I saw that you wanted to say something.
Well, because I think that also, like, I almost see it as another way of addressing the otherness with an engagement, with implications, and what I'm referring to specifically is that we are all like the greater Caribbean, we're all associated with each other. We all share colonial histories and we're implicated, and I think that's a different vantage point than the one that we're used to, which is that's another, they don't belong here. I will collect it and show it to you in a very National Geographic way because I have nothing to do with it. I am the civilian, they're the barbarians, I'm completely, my hands are completely clean on this story. So I think that, and to me, that's something that we can do from our part of, how you want to call it, I keep saying, Latino, whatever term you want to do, is that we can implicate ourselves because part of those constructions already had the implication of we're a mixture, then okay, then let's talk about what that means geographically, politically, and we can go down the list racially, and that's how then we can start talking about it. Oh yes, like Mario Martinez, yeah, he can be my uncle, but actually, he was. There's more to that.
Yeah.
That we should be talking about.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting expansion to the English-speaking Caribbean as well. I think that there are there are places that kind of can fall between the cracks, of like of curatorial attention, of institutional attention, because like there are no like strong institutions that are focused on this artists, right? So I think it's a really interesting expansion into that and like inclusion of them. And I've also I've admired and been following some other curatorial projects that have also included work by Filipino artists. I'm thinking about David Medalla in Forecast Form, the Islands project by Jessamine Batario, who's like a forthcoming curatorial project at Colby College that is really looking at the Philippines, but it's going back to 1898. It's looking at Filipino artists, Cuban, Puerto Rican, and there's a moment like just.
But
It's, like, really
I will
interesting.
say, I mean, we did include the Anglophone and Francophone Caribbean in Estamos Bien, but I mean, beyond the
Even
structures
Dutch,
of
no?
the
Even Dutch Caribbean, no?
yeah, but beyond La Trienal, like El Museo, even in the very, very early days when it was like, very much like this Puerto Rican institution was always very inclusive of others, which I think sometimes gets forgotten. So I think, we're really bringing it up with La Trienal, with flow states, but it's something that's always been present here at El Museo. And I'll also say, we're talking about these imperial histories that implicate us, but there's also just contemporary realities, right? Of like where there's a market, where you can be an artist, where you can have a viable practice. So like Ruben Ulysses Rodriguez Montoya, I got that name right. He calls himself a nomad. Who's kind of a borderlands artist. He's based in Mexico City, or Madeline Jimenez, who's a Dominican artist who's also based in Mexico City, or a Chaveli Cifre based in Berlin. So, it's not just of course, those imperial histories are the reasons why we have our contemporary realities, like very well with your work on tourism. But I think that's also what we were allowed to play with flow states.
There's quite a lot of new artistic commissions in the show, which is, a challenge always with exhibitions, and it's a little surprise here and there, or it can be a long process as well. So, how many are there? And like
10.
10
So like virtually a third of the show.
of the show. Yeah.
But that number is actually a little misleading because there's many artists. I mean, I have to say the artists have been very generous with us, but
Yes.
extremely generous in giving with this show. So a lot of them, even if it's not considered a commission,
It's new.
it's not only new, but was made for the show. So it ends up, this is, so I would say that that's very important, to be breaking ground, showing the work. And that's, I think, what makes this exhibition so important is that we offer an opportunity for the artists to think of their work for a context and react to that and, ask questions. And, we all grow together in the show, right? So yeah, so it's not easy, as you said, but it's totally worth it because it makes the show very much alive, and you can't. It's very different than doing a historical show. This is what I want to say. Yeah.
What kind of questions are they also aware of what another artist is making and how and they respond to that?
Not really. No, not really. I mean, in very few instances, we had to explain a room more to the art, right? That you put in it.
But I think an example of responsiveness. Of course, hopefully, there's no theme. Flow states is the title. We are intuiting different conversations, but we didn't. Flow states came, that was the end. All the artists were already picked. They led us to flow states. But I think the responsiveness is to our architecture. the architecture of the galleries. You know, we would say like, this is your area, this is how much room you have. Also like responsiveness to where we are here in El Barrio or across the street from Central Park in the case of Mark Menjivar's bird walks. So I think also like the place, the moment is some of that conversation.
I think the place also is New York City and the platform that New York allows, you know, with all the good and the bad, you know. And I think that, I mean, I assume that a lot of the, you know, that generosity and that wanting to present new work is also because this is an opportunity.
I mean, for sure, there's a visibility being in New York that, you know, being in a museum on Fifth Avenue and in New York, Museum Mayo and all that, you know, generates a level of visibility that, you know, to be fair, a lot of these artists haven't had, you know, didn't have before. And so obviously, you know, it's great that we benefit from that. But everybody, as I say, everybody grows with the show, right? In the show, I would say.
How does that visibility affect who you want to pick? Like,
well, I think this is a big deal too, because I was actually thinking a lot about this today in terms of like this idea of like, I really see these two shows almost like as a diptych, you know, so it's 75 artists. That's a very meaningful number, you know, between the two shows. So in a space of 3 years, because it's 3 years from one show to the next, the museum brought 75 artists to the galleries that were never exhibited here before. So this is, I don't know if this was a rule before. We didn't make it a rule this time around, but that's how it became, right?
Yeah, but I feel like there was like a silent, not like rule of like, you know, creating space.
But we did consider artists who had shown before, and they didn't
make it.
They
didn't make it. So like, and I also think that we are very conscious or aware of like where the Latinx conversation is right now. Like, you know, there's been all these shows, there's a lot of, you know, there's a little bit of noise with it. So making sure that we're always pumping new voices through the pipeline, at least is something that is important, I think, for.
Yeah, but there's also the fact that we want to bring people to the conversation that are not in the conversation. So.
Because it may not be that obvious that they should be part of the conversation.
We just said, like, Carolyn Kent, I don't think she was framed in a Latin American context or Latinx context before. Madalena Suarez Fremkes, who's an artist she's, I think, 94, now in her 90s. She never had a museum presentation in New York until now. So there's always, you know, a case of, you know, so it's each artist, there's different reason. So it's not a show like, oh, we're just doing like emerging artists who never showed in the, that's not about it. It's like, it's really making a list and how it is, you know, this different positionalities, right? I think that's the word. They one affect one another, right? So, and that, you know, could lead us to also to the, how we put the show together in the space, how we really wanted to create, you know, very specific rooms with very strong identities that, you know, would one lead to the other and all that.
Can you all expand on that, like the exhibition design and distribution of the works?
Sure. Yeah, it's we really wanted. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to repeat what I said, but we really wanted each of the rooms to have a strong identity and to bring artists in conversation that were not in conversation before, and so we basically have. That's in my mind at least. You just like shoot me that, but it's. I think we have like a room starting with landscape and cartography, leading to abstraction. I think there's a moment in the show where we have a lot of conversations about cultural archaeologies, nostalgia, memories. Then I think the body starts to really come into the show. I think there's a lot of interest. Susanna's essay in the book is about that. There's a lot of interest in how the body appears in the show. And then we have a very figurative room. And it was so much fun to do these rooms. And I could do it all again. It was like really delicious to work on it. And then room 110, which is the industrial space, it's really more a conversation between all these different trends and different threads and different, you know, if you think of like sculpture, for instance, no, like there's so many amazing ceramic work in the show. No, so that's a beautiful thread, I think, in the show.
Like,
So and Gadiel appears with Alberta Whittle, and I think that's a beautiful conversation because her film is about, you know, the Black Caribbean and, you know, in the context of immigration in the
Anina
UK.
Major as well.
And then Anina, but then back in the gallery. So it's just, you know, it's
Sarah?
yeah, please, sorry.
No, I was going to just Sarah. Sarah is also in that ceramic.
Sarah with her ceramics there.
But I mean, I will say again, like, the artists lead us in this project.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I also want to go back to a question you already asked with Maria Elena, but like, you know, Rodrigo and I are familiar with our architecture, so it's not really influencing who we're picking. We've actually picked everybody and then figured out the exhibition design. But I wanted to kind of twist your previous question because, you know, about being in New York City, because I wanted to ask Maria Elena, like, this is home for us. So, like, we're on our home turf. But, like, for you, I mean, that's why we wanted you to be a part of this, because you have so many connections. I mean, with Puerto Rico, also your time in Miami and with CCI. Now you're in Texas, Mexico, yeah. But I'm curious, like, did you do something different here? What did it feel like?
Well, I want to say two things before I answer your question, which is, I think is a good one. You know, we talk a lot about nationalities in terms of the artist list, but I do think that there's other threads that are also interesting in terms of the range of work, you know, from like painting to conceptual stuff to video. Like, I think that was also important to show like a range in terms of practice and also in terms of what it means to be an artist. You know, we have a couple of social practice work in which undocumented people are producing work, or just a regular person is producing work, imagery, like with the work of Mark and Estudio Lenca. We have artists that might not have the traditional training that you think an artist should be. So I think that was also important to kind of show that range, which I think I personally find it quite interesting that there's a lot of work that takes you to the artist's hand and making, which I don't know. I like, because that's something I cannot do.
Yeah,
Now,
like even creating musical instruments.
Exactly. I don't know, to be honest. You know, I always, at some point, I'll find out what New York means, because I feel like
Us too.
because I feel like we do a lot of stuff, and I wonder if Marina, you feel the same way in a different context, and we're doing it for so long, and suddenly it gets to New York, and it's like, wow, oh my God. And it's kind of like, really? Like, you know. So, so I don't, you know, I think for me, I can only bring what I feel like I can bring to the conversation. So for me, it was more about bringing my perspective. And yes, you know, I have purposely stayed away from New York. It's not a coincidence. Like, I wanted to go and live in Mexico City. I actually did not want to go live in Miami, but I was like, sure, let's go move to Miami because it's like a new museum that doesn't exist. What I mean by that, and you know that because we go way back, like I was never like a Basel person. Like you know what I mean? I wasn't into that Miami scene. All this to say is that I feel like that's what I can bring to the table, and I hope that just who I am, and more than anything, I just also enjoy, you know, working with you, working with Rodrigo.
Likewise.
Yeah, so to me that's more important, like that we're gonna be sane, that we're gonna make the project, and I also had like the best job.
The Zooms.
Yeah, and I also had the best job because I was the guest curator, so I didn't have all the institutional like maneuvers to deal with. So it was great.
No Excels for you.
No.
Limited Excels.
Limited Excel, limited conflict, limited. It was perfect.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I know. There's a catalog that
That you're in.
that I'm yes. but before we get to the collaborators, I want you to share with our audience? Because it's available for pre-order, I believe, right?
We have bigger supply of copies arriving tomorrow. So whether you can come back and purchase your copy here during the weekend, or you can pre-order now. So those are the two options at the moment.
Perfect. And there's a kind of curatorial statement, but also 3 individual essays with very distinct voices, and angles that you're tackling from, so I just, maybe Susana, you.
I mean, I'll just say, so both Rodrigo and I really like making publications.
Yes,
Like,
we
we
do.
really, really like it. It's like a
We
different...
really do.
We do.
It's good that people like you exist.
Yeah, we really like it. And I want to say, Zuna, where are you? Our colleague.
Suna Masa, shout out. Yeah.
And of course, all of our curatorial colleagues, but Zuna really helped with editorial management, especially. But yeah, Rodrigo and I love making publications. And also, I mean, part of the reason is, like, we love making shows, but shows are ephemeral. Like, you have until February 9th to come see Flow States, but you can always have this this book on your bookshelf, and we hope that it serves as a reference, just the same as the catalog for Estamos Bien. We wanted it to really, the Latinx field, it really is not new. I mean, there's been generations of Latinx artists, but I think scholarship is still, in some ways, emergent, and like, it didn't always have the context of a publication, Actually, El Museo is a great example because they were producing really valuable pamphlets since the 70s, but, more in a ad hoc way. Yeah. So for us, making the publication is just as important, if not more so, than the exhibition itself. I forgot what else you asked
It's
about.
Your essay.
My essay. Yes, my essay, Fluid Encounters.
I gotta say.
Fluid exchange.
Fluid exchange. I'm sorry, because we were debating.
Don't make it. Don't change.
I'm not gonna go. Yeah, I'm not gonna go there. But
props on the titles, you two.
This is the hidden title of the.
The hidden, yes, fluid exchanges was going to be the hidden title of the show.
Yeah, it is.
Didn't happen, but it happened for my essay. And yes, I mean, we have a room that's really centered on figuration, but I felt like there was so much about the body, about both like the viewer's body and encountering the works. Like, you walk through Cosmo White, Madeline Jimenez's invitation with the glory holes. And so, yes, that's what
Also, the title makes me think about Carmen Argote as well.
Totally.
With the fluids.
There's a lot of fluids happening.
A lot of fluidity. Marilena is mass flow.
Mass flow, yeah. I kind of playing with the trope of reggaeton as a music genre that is the most popular in the world right now, but it was also, part of an Afro-diasporic expression of people that felt and were oppressed at a particular moment, and that really much encompasses, Panama, Jamaica, the diaspora in New York, Puerto Rico, now Colombia,
Dominican Republic.
Republic.
A lot of Dominican producers. Yeah.
Exactly. So, so I like that with our context. To really also talk about a little about diaspora and how, Black is not a monolith. I spoke a little about Gadiel's work and how he creates different associations. Anina Mayer, and a bunch of others. Alberta Whittle, bit of Cosmo, bit of Madeline as well. So kind of speaking about that experience of Blackness diasporically.
Yeah, I think this was so important to, make Blackness really an entry point to the show, that, this can be part of the Latinx conversation, but it can be separated. So I think this is very important, a claim I would like to make, that all of these artists, they contextualize here in this conversation, but their work exists elsewhere. They have, other entry points, other affinities, other contexts, where, I think that's really important. So with that in mind, my contribution is an essay looking at somehow an art historical perspective of El Museo as an institution to think of diaspora as diasporic movements as an art historical category or enquadramento, no framing
Yeah.
of us beyond the traditional notion of nationality,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah.
So-
What I found really interesting is like it's explicitly saying diaspora as an art historical category.
That, I do say that, yes. I say not art of the Americas, but diasporic art in the Americas, yeah. So this is, I think, a little bit of what the museum does historically. I bring up a few examples like the Caribbean in the Crossroads exhibition, Nexus New York, both. One is curated by Deborah, the other one is curated by Elvis, no? Or Deborah did
I
curate
think
both?
the other one was the Historical Society, actually.
No, but Caribbean is Elvis.
Oh, Caribbean's Elvis, yeah.
So
yeah,
Caribbean
yeah,
is Elvis
yeah.
and Nexus New York. These are the two ones I bring, and also Popular Painters and Other Visionaries, which is a show I co-curated with Susanna here in 2022 that looks at modernism from a more decolonized way, less Eurocentric way, essentially, and looking at how, this diasporic movement also constituted a marginal history of modernism, no? Looking at Haiti, Brazil, other places in South America, but essentially Haiti, Brazil, and the United States, right? This is Popular Painters. So with all that fermenting there, I make this, claim of flow states, like a contemporary approach to these ideas in our history. And I think, I bring up Sankofa, the film collective in Great Britain, as, also a very accomplished example of, thinking of diaspora as a category to, really look at film culture in their case, or film in their case. So yeah, a little bit of all that, and I also look at a brief history of biennials and triennials, countering this with Whitney, with the São Paulo Biennale of 1998, where that global South big theory of anthropophagia was, put forward by Paulo Reckenhoff and Adriano Pedrosa. And also I look at the current Biennale di Venezia with the idea of the foreigner, that Adriano, which is like the complete negation or denial of uma negação of this idea of the national. No? So it's the exact antagonical concept. Yeah. A little bit of all this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting moment to be thinking about nationalism in the United States.
I think that's a big part of it. It's that
Very charming moment.
There's a quote by Donald Trump in my essay, and I apologize for this in advance. But really reacting to the horrible, terrible. Horrible thing he said about like poisoning the blood of a country. So I think this show is really definitely against that. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, as it should be.
As it should be.
Maybe this is bringing in like a lot of how I work. I think a lot about like pieces that anchor a show, or pieces that help me make the rest of the selection, or things that there's like absolutely I gotta have this because there's this this is part of the ideas that I want to put forward, and then that kickstarts the whole thinking process and negotiation with yourself or with other people that you're working with. I wonder if that is something that that approaches your way of thinking about curating, or it's very different.
I mean, for me, it depends on the show, I'll say. But I'll say for this particular show, I really wanted to have at least an artist that had a different migratory story, like people like Chaveli or Madeline, because sometimes you think a lot about a natural flow between the U.S.
Yeah.
and just go north.
Everybody wants to be here.
Exactly, but sometimes you take a different migratory. I think that's actually more common for people that like, even if the final goal is to come to the U.S., they stop somewhere because they just had to stop. So so for me that was important to, and also for that to be an integral part of what it means to be Latino in this country. Because I think that when you separate Latin American or Latinx, you're denying part of your story, and I think that just creates more conflict than productivity. So that was like my only kind of secret agenda.
What was it? Can you repeat it?
Just including like an artist
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
No.
No, got it.
Like a different flow.
Yeah.
Like
A different flow,
They
because-
flow to a different place.
Yeah. Yes.
This is it. No, it's like this accumulation of complexities. No, it's you can't stop it. Until the very end. So I would say, I want to be very provocative with my co-curator. Say that a big anchor piece of this show for me is Studio Lenca's work, which was like doors closing included, right? And it's such a beautiful Jose Campos Studio Lenca. I don't know if he's here tonight. I don't think so. But it's the work that Maria Elena referred to before, that's made by non-artists or non-formally trained artists during this, workshops that he does. That's called routes. How do you say this?
Yes.
Rutas. Thank you so much. My Portuguese was like killing me here. So rutas or routes. And there's this quote in my essay, sorry, I'll go back to that real quick, by Stuart Hall, where I said the replacement of routes by routes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of, also what you're saying, I think. Whenever the diasporic movement undoes something somewhere, it does something somewhere else, right? So I think it's a lot about that. And those paintings, they're so beautiful. They are like amazing.
And Susanna, any hidden agendas?
I'm gonna say no. I mean, there was some, once I have to say, like, I don't know who's gonna do the next Trienal, but I was hoping I was gonna do this Trienal. So as soon as Estamos Bien closed, I was like making my list, and not everybody on that list made it necessarily. And I'm not gonna say who it is. We have artists in the room, but
That's for later.
yeah. But no, I mean, it's very, you never know. Also, because there were some artists, let's say, that I was super interested in 3 years ago, and they're doing something else, or they're not even making art or what have you. So things shift.
And so many discoveries, no? I mean, I didn't know half of these artists 2 years ago, right? So it's like we keep discovering people and along the way. So this is, my hidden agenda is to play it to the last second.
Yeah.
That's it.
Nerve-wracking.
Don't stop, just keep it open, keep it going, because it's going to be better and better.
Good. So you brought a bunch of us as collaborators for the publication as well. I think we're like 10 of us?
10, 11, yeah,
Something like that. Just, there are very, very short essays on each artist, some of which we didn't know, what kind of work was going to be in the show, because it was just like, all the commissions, like Alberto
So you're
Whittle,
talking
like no
about
idea.
That's the side effect.
Yes. Maybe we can pass it on to our audience if there are any.
Yeah, just another
Pressing
quick
questions.
note about the publication, since you brought it up again. It's fully bilingual. I don't think we mentioned that before, and that's super important. That this information, all this scholarship, all this research, is available both through the English readership and the Spanish readership. So. Yeah.
Can I just add a little bit more too about I would love for you to elaborate on what you said about how challenging. We had the same challenge, writing about work that was in the midst of production. But I'll just say, again, I think we're in a different moment than we were for Estamos Bien. So in some senses, I think Estamos Bien, that catalog, was more of an internal dialogue between the artists and the curators, even, the artist pages
Yeah, we had,
where
like,
we had
prompts, yeah.
questions for them that all the artists answered. So I think, we're always interested in building on like this multivocality. And so the opportunity to invite more people like you and other colleagues whose work we admire to like do a more deep dive into each artist's practice was exciting.
Yeah, I mean, from my end, what I can say is that there were some artists that I was very, like I had either already worked with them or I was working on a show, but then there was someone else that I met.
Oh yeah, we made that on purpose.
Hidden agenda.
So that you would say yes.
No,
Like,
we-
oh, it's only I know. That's
because,
what. Okay.
because
Oh,
we
this will be
wanted-
easy.
We wanted to. It's the same thing as with the show. Now we wanted to initiate conversations, to trigger, foster new conversations that didn't exist before.
Yeah, I mean, I must say that like I appreciate that as as another curator that was invited to be a writer, because then that also helps me broaden, my own knowledge, my own network of people, and I think that expands the field ultimately.
And I want to just mention that you guys had curated that wonderful show at the museum where you are chief curator, right? Or curator?
Curator.
Yeah, curator. And that show,
Pelao.
Puerto Negrix, how do you
Puerto Rico Negra. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I missed the Rico. Yeah, so that show, it was, wonderful to see, and we, all went to have white wine and prosciutto at night, and and we talked so much and say, oh no, Marina, you were really so generous, and of course, and and also your connection with Maria Elena, having worked on that project, was really a great, asset we had, basically.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
And one last thing about the contributors, not everyone is a curator, which we were excited
Oh yeah,
about.
yeah. There's writers, but there's a number of curators from other institutions. I think it's always great because it keeps.
I think-
it's
Yeah, another
generative.
Suna,
It's like-
Elena Gonzalez Ketelman Gonzalez, sorry.
and Chloe
Ellie,
Courtney,
who's here
our
with us today.
And I also feel like, museums are very traditional spaces, especially when it comes to the curator role and the director role. So I think that to destabilize our own voices is very important. It's very important.
I appreciate that. That's wise. Wise of you to say. Should we turn it over to the audience? Okay, we're gonna distribute 2 microphones, and please wait till you get you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Patrick's gonna be the first one, and don't hesitate to ask anything. But also, if you want to, please wait till you get the microphone so that everything is recorded.
I just wanted to say how fascinating it is to think about the evolution that Trienal has had since the early S-Files. And I think this process has been a process of expansion, expanding the notion of cultural identities. And I feel that what you're bringing here is complexity. As you mentioned, you're bringing complexity, and also you're questioning the idea that cultural identity is located in a specific geographical point, and there is always flow. There is always flow, so congratulations. Congratulations, and to El Museo del Barrio, because I think this is a fascinating evolution. And I think we're taking La Trienal, and I think the exhibitions in the right direction.
Here, here. Don't be shy. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Noel Olivas. Thank you so much for putting this show together. It's really amazing to see how you're putting all these artists on the map and getting to see their conversation. One thing that I was thinking about was as these artists are talking about their history, their experiences, the diaspora, what stood out to me was spirituality as well. Objetos del futuro, like just even being called by the songs, the instruments, almost looking like an altar. I was just curious if you can speak a little bit more about the spirituality of the show, because these histories and the complexity of the histories is also going back to indigenous spirituality. and there's a healing portion to that. And I just, if you can talk a little bit more about that, please.
Well, I'll say that yes, there's a lot of work that speaks about that or alludes to how, and I think a lot about like the Afro-diasporic, like in terms of Katia Saniler or Gadiel Rivera or Albert Tagüero. And of course, there's the indigenous entry point, which is another, and we talked about it, like there could have been another essay on the book on indigeneity, right? But of course, those practices were sources, were at one point the only thing that people could bring from the Middle Passage, and I'm just speaking now from like, the Afro-diasporic, was their religion, because they were just treated like cattle. So it became vehicles for survival. And I think that, as we know, our communities are, often feel like they're under attack, and can feel overwhelming. And I do think, regardless of where you stand on the spectrum of belief, you can find something, a spiritual practice that can help you through a moment, literally. So I think that that's also something meaningful to consider as part of our history and our identities.
I just want to mention that the work that you refer to is the installation by Koyo Zinkli. And that was one of the commissions, and Koyo did this beautiful work for us, where she goes to Ecuador and she connects with, people of major spiritual relevance for her personally, and she creates the sound objects that are, made for each of these people. There's 4 of them. And you see 3 of them in the main screens in the installation. And then there's a 3rd screen, which is an allusion that the person who passed away during the making of that piece. And yeah, that's, just want to make sure we had, Koyo's recorded. Yeah.
And I'll just add quickly, I think that also comes out through the materiality that the artists, across the show are using, very obviously making conscious choices in what they're approaching. But I think that also comes out in, the work of Norberto Roldan, who has been collecting these salvaged materials that don't belong to him but are being bulldozed in a part of the Philippines, really bringing that history back to life in these kind of domestic altar-like ziggurat assemblages. But even in works that I think spirituality is present, but maybe not always talked about, like a Carmen Argote and even Ruben's work, those like really hybrid, sometimes super messy pieces that are collecting. That, who wants to talk about the aura of artwork that's like so like art historical? But I think like those materials, they really retain a certain like essence that they bring to light.
Yeah, even Carolyn Kent as well. Yes, yes. The other paintings in that same gallery, I'm forgetting.
Oh yeah.
Just absolutely beautiful work. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for those who couldn't. Lance de los Reyes, who also we should mention is the only artist who he's no longer living. He's passed in the show. Those are drawings. He was a graffiti artist. And we're showing more like intimate works on paper that he made they're very intense text and drawings.
Now that you mentioned that he's the only like artist that has passed, what prompted that decision?
This was Rodriguez, so well.
Yeah.
Oh no, I've been fascinated by Lance for some time. Actually, I first saw him as an actor in a movie by the Safdie brothers, a movie that's set here in New York that's called Daddy Long Legs. I don't know if you watched it. And I saw this guy, and I went to the cinema to the movie theater to watch that, and I saw that guy on the screen and say, "Oh, who's this guy?" And has like a little between a cameo and a role in the film. So. And then I, named as Rambo there, and then I get that, that was his moniker as a graffiti artist. And then, I through common friends, I got to, know about he had just died when I watched the film, so. And so Lance, he was doing this beautiful text on the BQE especially, but he was also associated with some people. He was a studio assistant of Donald Batchelor. He was, close to Julian Schnabel, and he shows, with Vito Schnabel, who's, Julian's son. So there was also, there was a lot of aura around him, and I was, I grew fascinated, and I shared with Susanna and Maria Elena. I said, yeah, let's explore this. I had seen his 2 shows with Vito, and then one very cold morning, we went to Bushwick, me and Susanna. We're always, when we're in Brooklyn, me and Susanna, it's the coldest day of the year. I remember right there. So we were there, and so we visited Ana de los Reyes, who's, her widow, and we were, she was so generous. She opened all these flat files. We were like browsing hours, looking at those beautiful works on paper. And then, at the end, she came to us and said, like, oh, I just want you guys to know that he's not Latino, he's Filipino. And okay, all right. That is so interesting, because we were making an assumption, him born in Houston, Texas, that he would be, Mexican American, or, and that was not the case. And that's the conversation was already happening around, how we wanted to include artists from the Philippines. So in this case, it just, happened more naturally. Yeah, I would say.
And I wanted to make one last comment about like the spiritual, because I think that we live in a moment where, the spiritual conflated with religion, it's really leading the conversation, and in a way that it's about controlling people's behaviors.
And bodies.
And bodies. And what I like about addressing the spiritual curatorially is more about like, a form of healing or a form of personal resistance or personal, endurance. And I think that that's actually more basic and accessible to everybody. that I don't think any of the artists in the show are telling you, you need to join my beliefs and you need to join what I'm talking about. I think it's more about sharing an experience and see if you want to engage or not.
I think ultimately it's also about community, like the endurance of a feeling of togetherness and being healed through that, and like connecting to your past, but also being present with other people that may share similar experiences. And I think that that's what really comes across for me when I see works that are imbued with that spirituality. It's just that kind of reaching out and kind of bringing you in some ways. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Elijah. I guess my question, or just was curious about your thoughts for the show, like thinking about identity and bodies and even materiality that's used by some of these artists. Just as someone who's a Latinx and queer as well, just thinking about queerness and things of gender and sexuality and how those are very pertinent topics in contemporary art right now. And so I guess I was just curious about like the inclusivity of like those types of artists that are marginalized and whatnot within this show. I was just thinking about Ser Serpas and their installation, and just how like El Museo as like an institution could be more inclusive of those identities, like, and for the next iteration of La Trienal. So
I think those identities are in the show. I think all of these identities are in the show. I hope they're all in the show. But I think also we don't always lead with that because the artists don't always lead with that. Like, I don't think Sarah necessarily, Sarah Serpas necessarily leads with that either. And I mean, we talk about that too, like in how we do our labels, not necessarily with queerness, but even with where people are from, their backgrounds. You know, we just say like born and where they're based, and sometimes that gives you an indication of who they are, and like with Lance de los Reyes, sometimes it doesn't. And I think, you know, we try and let the artists and the artwork really lead those kind of, like, I don't think that's our role to necessarily place them first.
Okay. No, I just want to say thank you for your question. I think it's a great point. I just want to mention the last room in the galleries here, where we have like a lot of works where sexuality, desire, queer desire are put forward with like the paintings of Roberto Gil de Montes. I think, you know, Alina Perez's work, it does address that as well, and Maria Capron as well. So I think this was, you know, something that, at least for me, was really important to, you know, to bring these works together and look at, I would say, you know, desire, you know, sexual repression, fluid exchanges, yeah. And I just want to say also, you know, I want to make sure I comment briefly on Carmen Argote's work. You know, her name was brought up before, you know, but how this, you know, we were talking about the curation and, you know, how this, you know, and we have this artist whose, you know, practice is, you know, also very much grounded on walking and, you know, and spending time out and all that. And we have her work not located in one gallery, but we have her work sort of processioning through the show and, you know, appearing as in movement as the show progresses. And yeah, I think, you know, Carmen is an important artist, and how, you know, the show was also curated.
I think what I was gonna say, that's what this is like a summary, kind of what they both said. Like, you know, of course, what we're interested in is in art, right? It doesn't matter necessarily what the artist identifies, or, you know, and if there are themes that are important to tackle, even if they make us feel uncomfortable, we are still gonna show it. Like, for example, you know, like you mentioned the last room, and with the work that Alina did, we know that work is gonna make some people feel uncomfortable, you know, but it's important to show it, because not only is a good work of art, you know, in terms of the formal qualities, what it's talking about is something that I'm sure all of us have some type of connection to. Even if we were not, we may have a friend, you know what I mean? So I think that it's an important conversation that that when we don't have it, then there's all these conspiracy theories about all this other stuff. So I think that, curatorially speaking, being expansive, not only in terms of who the artists are, the subject, but always with the idea that you want to show something that's relevant and meaningful, to me is always a good strategy.
And it was also addressed in the previous Trienal. It was just also, so it's been present.
And of course, noting that it's a never-ending conversation, you know.
Yeah, but I agree with you that we could totally do a show that focuses on themes like this. So I appreciate your perspective. Not necessarily a survey show, because it's on a survey show, it's part of it. But I would totally, you know, agree with you that this is, you know, merits an exhibition on its own, always, yes.
Yeah, or just more of like the like explicitness or like specificness of it, because I think there's sometimes that those things are often overlooked within like the like LGBTQ plus community, with just even the simple inclusion of like pronouns, you know, like of artists or things like that. So, but thank you.
Yeah.
We have someone in the back.
Hi, my name is Misia. Just a quick question. Throughout your conceptual approach all the way to fully designed exhibition, where did you feel most electrified? And then, yeah, I'll stop with that.
I mean, for me, the best part were the studio visits. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Electrified. That's so good.
Yeah, it's not even excited, it's electrified.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
so good. I love that. I'm really thinking hard.
No, but I'm stealing from
Like-
Patrick. Yeah, because yesterday really was because like I shared with the artist, but during Estamos Bien, we really couldn't come together in the same way because of the pandemic. I mean, we did like Zoom champagne toasts, you know, like we did the best we could. And we got to meet, you know, a number of artists at the end. But to see, we took like a group shot yesterday
Oh
with
my
like
God, that was
22
amazing.
of 33 artists. It was so amazing. I almost cried just to like have you all with us. So, and like the artists are here, some artists are here. That
So-
really, so thank you, Patrick.
So for her, it's the studio visits. For her, it's the open. For me, it's the book. It's when, it's when I send it to the press, like those very final tweaking, like it's now or never. I feel very electrified. Can
Hitting,
barely sleep. Frankly.
hitting send, like,
The plotter, exactly.
great question. Thank you for that question. I think that on
I love that question. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
like on that electrifying, you know, note, maybe we can just end it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can end it. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.